So we're going to be starting today with where we left off on Monday, January 9th. So I'm going to download client schedule W17, and that's where we'll start working today. There's nothing too magical about this particular workbook, except it's a workbook that has some data in it. And we'll be working with more of the higher level objects, but having some data, especially some shapes, when we get to talking about shapes, will be helpful. Okay, so I'm just going to bring up my code editor. Alt F11 is the quick way to do that. And I think I'm going to push my immediate window up to the top so that my shiny head isn't blocking it for any of you. What do we got here? And then I'm going to make a new module. So insert new module. So we're working with a blank module, and we've got the immediate window here. Okay. Are you with me, or are you still getting there? You're still getting there? Wonderful. How do we get that bottom thing? Oh yeah, the immediate window is View, Immediate Window, or Control G. Open it enough. You need the shortcut key, but there it is. And I've put my immediate window, you can actually make it float. You can drag it to a different screen if you've got multiple screens. Anyway, I put it at the top just so that it's just higher, so that I'm not blocking it. Okay. And then this here we have a module. I've inserted a new module. So module 1 was what we did on the 9th of January, and then module 2 will be what we're doing today. All right, so I'm just going to create a new sub-procedure. Actually, before we get started, I'm going to help you with some settings that I think will make your lives somewhat more bearable in this class. Have you been there where you type something in VBA, and you didn't quite type it right, you leave the line turns red, and a dialog box comes up telling you you made a mistake? That's really annoying when you're first starting at this, because almost every line you make a mistake. You know, it's like, do I really need to be told every line I've made a mistake? I mean, it's going to go red, that's enough. So we're going to get rid of that dialog box for you by coming to Tools, Options, and the very first checkbox, Auto Syntax Check, just uncheck that. It'll still highlight the line in red if there's an error on the line, but it won't nag you with that, can I say godforsaken? Yes. With that godforsaken dialog box.
Can you show me that one more time?
Sure. Tools, Options, and then it's the very first checkbox. Auto Syntax Check. Incidentally, while you're there, require variable declaration. You might as well check that. We'll talk about that later in the class. But that's a good thing to have. We'll talk about variables later, but this will be. That's actually what will make this option explicit show up. It's not a big deal yet if you don't have it there. We'll talk about how it's helpful later. All right, so I'm going to create a new sub-procedure. I'm going to call this the Workbooks Demo. All right. So the first thing to realize, what we're talking about is collections. So let's rewind just a bit. We have talked about kind of the building blocks for this environment is something called an object. Someone tell me what an object is. An object is a thing. What are two characteristics of objects? Objects have blank and blank. Methods and properties, right? Methods are instructions that object knows how to do. I can tell that object to do something it knows how to do. I'm calling one of its methods. If it's like a range, I can tell it to select itself, and it becomes the active cell. And then it has properties. Properties then tell us something about the way the object is. Okay, so good. Objects have methods and properties. Collections are objects. Special class of object, special kind of object. So do you think collections have methods and properties?
Yes.
Yeah, they're objects. They have methods and properties. But the thing about collections is that the main purpose for a collection is to hold references to other objects. I got a dozen objects out here, and I want a way to be able to kind of collect them all together, and so I've got them in one place so that I can work with them. That's what a collection is. It's a collection of objects. Collections are a collection of objects. Now, we're talking about the three main built-in collections in VBA. The one, kind of the highest level one, is called the Workbooks collection. Let's take a look. When I'm here in a sub-procedure and I want to have something get printed up to the immediate window, I say debug.print. And now I'm going to say workbooks. That's the name of the collection. If I say dot, it'll go, oh look, you've got an object. Here's some properties and methods you could deal with. And the one I'm interested in is count. Every collection has a count property. Whether it's a collection of worksheets, or a collection of cells, or a collection of shapes, or a collection of, there's lots of other things we make collections of, those are the main built-in ones. It's got a count property. It tells me how many objects there are in the collection. So this should tell me how many workbooks there are in the workbooks collection. There's only one. That seems like a kind of pitiful collection. Now, what does that mean? I only have one workbook on this computer? No. The workbooks collection is the collection of all the workbooks that are currently open. And so, right now there's only one. In fact, it's this one. Client schedule W17 1.xlsm. Apparently, I've downloaded this twice, and so I had to put 1 after 3. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get another workbook open. There are two primary ways that we can add a new workbook into this collection. One is just create a new workbook. Oh, it's so easy. I'll F N L. New workbook created. I'll execute that line, run that, and now we've got 2 workbooks. However you want to create that workbook is fine. Choose from the file, new workbook. But I can actually add a new workbook through code. Workbooks. There's a method of the workbook collection called add. There it is, it's the first one. And that will it'll just make a new workbook. So now I currently have 2 workbooks. When I execute this code, it's going to add another one, and it should print 3, because by the time this line runs, there will be 3 workbooks open. Probably got book 1, book 2, and client schedule. There they are. Questions so far?
So many.
What's that? Was it a real question or just a comment? It was kind of under the breath comment.
Also, I didn't get the Alt F and L thing.
Oh, sorry. It's hotkeys. You're over here in Excel.
That's why.
File, new, and then L is for blank workbook.
Got it. Good.
So I have book 1 Excel open and the client schedule open. Is that what should be happening?
Yeah, so you can have as many open as you want. You should have at least 2.
But okay.
In fact, every time you run this, it's going to add another one.
But every time I run it, I get an error saying we should have a end sub.
Well, somehow you can get the end sub automatically generated. Just come down and type it. That's all. Question in the back?
Mine says it's an invalid or unqualified reference.
Good. If only we had TA here. TA to the rescue. Take a look. See if you can't find the syntax error. Let me know. There was another question in the middle here. Yeah.
Mine says the macros in this project are disabled. Please refer online help.
Yeah, if your macros are disabled, what you're going to have to do is start by reinstalling your operating system. Close the workbook, save it, open it again, and it will probably prompt you to enable the macros. If it doesn't, let me know, and we'll come see what's going on. You can actually set Excel to tell it to disable all macros and not even give you the chance to enable them. I'm guessing yours isn't that way, but if it is, we can undo that thing. What was the problem up there?
I don't know. They figured it out before I got there.
No, it's good when that happens.
Oh man. So
What was the problem? Figure it out.
Yeah. Jimmy figured it out for me. I thought there was a period connector for it. There's not.
Ah, yeah. I wish that I could make this a little bit bigger, but for some reason on my computer, when I come to Tools, Options, Editor Format, change this up to like 18 points. Oh, did it this time. Never mind. That's better. Is that better?
Yeah.
That's about the right size. Let's see. Okay. Okay. So I've added a bunch of times. It looks like I've got 8 workbooks open now. Ugh.
I got 6.
6 is enough. 8 is enough. That was a television show when I was a kid. 8 is enough. A family with 8 kids. Most of us Mormons thought they're just getting started. Okay. So let me go ahead and I'm going to comment out some of this stuff. I'm going to leave it in here so you still kind of have it in the workbook when we're done. But let's take a look at something else, how we might now refer to those workbooks using the collection. So right now, I've got 8 workbooks open. There's several ways I can refer to it. So let me just go ahead and debug.print. I'm going to print workbooks. Now instead of saying dot here, this is going to get me to properties and methods of the collection of objects. I want to get to the properties and methods of one of the objects in the collection. To do that, I've got to tell it which of the 8 workbooks in this collection I'm talking about. So before I hit the dot, I'm going to put an opening parenthesis. Then I'm going to tell it which one I want. I want number 8. Closing parenthesis. Now when I hit a dot, it's going to give me the properties, not of the collection, but of that object in the collection. What kind of object is that? It's a workbook. So these are now the properties of the workbook. So I can ask for the name of the workbook.
When you put 8 in there, that's because you have 8 files open.
Yeah, I have 8. How many do you have?
I only have 3. So.
Don't put a number higher than the number of workbooks you have open.
Right.
Any number that's less than or equal to the number of workbooks you have open will work.
What does debug? What's the debug command?
Debug. What's going on here? Okay, so here, why don't you tell me, what's your best guess? Not necessarily you who asked the question, but anyone. Your best guess. When you see a dot in the middle, tell me what you think is to the left of that dot. That is an, I'll even narrow it down by giving you an article that ends with an N. That is an object. Yeah, so there's some object here that I can refer to methods of to do something. I'm telling a particular object to do something it knows how to do. So there's an object called debug, and when I call its print method, it goes, oh, yeah, I know what to do. I'm going to put something up here in the immediate window. So this is just the name of an object, and it's one that we use for debugging. You're probably not going to send your user to come look at the immediate window, but so we'll just use it while we're debugging. It's just so I can see it do something. I could show it in a message box, but those get annoying. Yeah.
What's the hotkey to run your code?
A hotkey to run the code is Alt FL7248 or F5. It's actually just F5. The other one isn't real. So F5 will execute this. Okay, so now all I'm expecting this to do is to print the name of one of these workbooks. Now, let's see. I've got 8 workbooks open. One of them opened, with a name. It was called Client Schedule or something. And then I opened 7 more. They're probably named Sheet 1, or Workbook 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'm expecting it to be Workbook 7 or something like that. Book 7. So I'll run this and see what happens. There it is, Book 7. That's the name of that workbook. Now, we can actually combine these last 2 statements into one. So instead of saying, well, I don't... Oh, incidentally, what do you think Workbook 1 is? What do you think the name of Workbook 1 is? Yeah, it's the first one that was open. And so the number, this ordinal number that I'm giving here, identifies them in the order in which they were open. Go ahead.
Mine says runtime error 9.
Runtime error 9. Subscript out of range. Let me answer that question here for everyone. Okay, so how many do I have open? I've got 8. So what's going to happen if I put a 9 in there?
The same error.
I've got 8 workbooks. I want to open the 9th one. There's a couple things that could happen. I mean, Excel could go, there's no 9th one. I'll create a new one so there could be a 9th one. And then open it. That doesn't do that. It's just, in fact, this number right here, that number is called the subscript. I am saying workbooks. And what I really want to do is I want that to drop down. If there's a way to do it, I would want that to drop down and just be a subscript. Workbooks subscript 9. That's the way I'd really like to do it. But the editor doesn't let me do that. In fact, no programming environment has put a subscript, at least none that I know of. And so instead of just dropping it down and making a little number to identify how that's different from the rest of the workbooks, we put those in parentheses. But we still refer to that as a subscript. And so when I try to execute this, it's going to tell me do I have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, I have 9. 10, 120, that should do it. Subscript out of range. Thank goodness it didn't make the other 110 that it needed to be able to open, the 120. So yeah, that's just saying you tried in this collection you tried to use a subscript that was outside of the range. So it's actually a message. If you only knew what a subscript was, the message would make some sense. And now you do. Yeah. How many of you have gotten errors so far you're writing in some other context? The error has come up. Really, just like 3 of you?
Like other contexts.
Yeah, other contexts, not just today. And how many, when you got that error message, you looked at it and said, that doesn't help at all. That's the experience. Even for me, that's even still the experience. What the heck is that talking about? Not all the time. But occasionally I'll come across an error that I have no idea what it means. But for the basic ones, those are usually the error messages up in the thousands. This was number 9. It's been around a long time. I've had some experience. Okay. Now, we can combine these two things here, right? So I can say, I'll just pop up here to the immediate window and say print workbooks.count. It'll tell me I have 9. Well, this is just a 9 right here. I can put any expression inside these parentheses that evaluates to a 9. That's nice. What does this expression evaluate to? 9. So I'm going to do something kind of tricky here. I'll do it on another line so we can kind of preserve the history of this example. This looks a little bit weird. Print workbooks, workbooks count.name. But think back to this one, workbooks number 9, and hey, this means 9. So what's the English translation for what I just said to do in VBA here? I'll get you started. I'm going to print the name of the most recently opened workbook. I guess last, find a way to say that is last. And so that should print that same 9. Okay. We'll run this again, it should print. So it prints the name of that workbook. How many of you are looking at this going, that's really ugly? Workbooks, open parenthesis, workbooks.count. I'm looking at that and saying, that's kind of ugly. But that's the way it does it. Any expression that evaluates to an integer in here will go right there. Yeah?
Yeah, but what's valuable about that is that if you had, depending on how many workbooks open, it'll automatically always be the last one instead of just doing the number 9.
That's right. Yeah, that's why this is valuable. It says, I don't know which one's the last one. I don't care which is the last one. But whichever one is the last one, I want to know the name of it. Or I want to close it. Close. So now we're ready to close the most recently opened workbook. Now, if we made any changes to it, let me go make some changes to book number 8. Some changes made to it. When I close this, it'll be a little bit annoying because it's going to say, saying you can't debug print close, you just got to say close. It's going to say, do you want to save your changes? When I'm writing through code, I would just like to be able to tell it whether to save the changes or not. Unfortunately, that's possible. I'm going to cancel this, come back to my code, workbook.close, press the space bar, and it says, hey, look, you got like 3 other arguments that you can give. You can modify the ways the close method works by default. You can give it some information. And this first one's the important one, save changes. This is a true or false value. I'll just say save changes true or save changes false. Let's say I don't want to save the changes, save changes false. And we'll close the workbook without saving the changes. Yeah?
So on those things, it's a space, it's not like a comma or parentheses with those. There's a bunch of optional arguments right there.
Yeah, a bunch of arguments that come after this. So this gets, sometimes we put parentheses here, and sometimes we don't put parentheses here. We'll talk about that more specifically later, but for right now, just put a space and then put the argument. Now, if I want to refer to the next argument, I put a comma. File name only makes sense if I say save changes. I want to do like save as a different file name. I give it the file name there, and it would save it with a different file name. If I supplied a file name here, I think it would be okay. We'll just ignore it. We don't need that file name for anything. And I have no idea what route. I can't even say it, so how do I know what it does? Route workbook does. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'm going to print afterwards. I'll do this. I'm going to print the number of workbooks. I'm going to close the workbook, and then I'm going to print the number of workbooks it is. So that should print for me.
Like copy those things really fast without highlighting them.
Oh, what's the question?
You copy the workbooks really fast, so you don't have to highlight them.
Oh, how did I copy that line so fast?
Yeah.
Like lightning. How did I do it? All right, I'll tell you. There, I want to copy this line. I am going to come to the very first character, hold the shift key down, and I'm going to press the down arrow. So that copies that line, including the carriage return character at the end that you don't see here. If I want to duplicate the line, it's even faster. So I just hit the down arrow, then I'm going to copy it, Control-C, and then I'm going to paste it, Control-V. While it's highlighted, we'll paste right over the top of the one that's highlighted. It's okay to replace it, and then Control-V will paste it again as many times as I want. And so you want to duplicate a line fast, copy it, Control-C, Control-C, Control-V does the copy, and you go pretty fast. You've noticed I'm pretty rough on the keyboard, except when it comes to copying and pasting. Yeah.
So I use the close property, and it closed without asking me to save. Because
So
I didn't change anything.
yeah, if you haven't made a change to that file, you just open the file and then close it. Here's 7. I haven't changed this, so I close it because you didn't save anything.
That's fine.
We're going to close. Now, I thought I said to close book number. Oh no, it was book number 9 that I closed. Yeah, so I didn't. It probably wouldn't have prompted me either. But now book number 8 should be my last one out there. Let's just see what the name of it is. Here's the one. Yeah, that's book number 8. So now, even though number 8 is the one I have made changes to, here's some more changes. And so now when I execute this one, it should close number 8 without prompting for any message. If I'm actually running the procedure. So I've got to have my insertion point in the procedure, click run. It says we've got 8 of them. It closed the one without prompting us, and then it says we got 7. Yes, question?
Can 0 and 1 be evaluated as true and false?
Can 0 and 1 mean true or false? Yes, sort of. Let's take a look. We'll just do it here in the medium window. Here's the question. Okay, so first of all, 1 equals 1. Is that true or false?
True.
So how about false equals false? Yeah, that's true. That's like 2 rights make it wrong. There's two falses equal. 2 falsehoods equal to truth or something. Anyway, false is false. That's true. Okay, so now the question is 0 equal false?
Nah.
What do you think? Yeah. We'll convert one to the other as it's doing the comparison. Now, does 1 equal true? What do you think? False. What? -1 is true. That's
Everything
bizarre.
has its opposite.
That's bizarre.
So can you put in those arguments to 0?
Yeah, could you put 0 for this? Yeah, absolutely. 0 and false means the same thing. False doesn't mean anything. If you want it to be true, you can put -1. But I have a hunch if you put 1 there, it would figure it out that you mean true. I know it worked okay. Vasily. Okay. All right. So let's see. What else do I want to say about workbooks? Let's see. Count. Oh, yeah. We don't know all the important things yet. So each one of these workbooks has a name, and this is one of the neat things about collections in VBA. Most programming environments have some way to say, I've got a set of something, I want to refer to an element in that set with the number that it is in that element. But in VBA, when those elements in the set are objects that have a name property, you can usually refer to them by their name as well. So, comment these out. And then let's do a debug. This is closed. I've got enough of these open. I'm going to close one. So workbooks.close without saving. Let's see. We've printed names. Yeah, we've printed off their names before. So now I want to close a workbook by its name. I got a book 5 out here that I want to close. So in quotes, I will put its name, book 5, not case sensitive, book 5. That's the name of the workbook. I want to close it. I should be able to execute that. And see that book 5 is now closed. 6, 4, 3, 2, 1, but book 5 is gone. So I can execute, I can identify an element in a set. If it's named, if the set has names, I can refer to the elements in that set by its name. That's really handy. That way I don't have to worry about which order it was opened in. If I know the name, I can close it. Or refer to it, for some other reason. Now, what happens if I try to run this again? The error message is going to be a little bit upsetting. Subscript out of range. Is there even a subscript here?
Yes.
I don't know. I guess, sort of. Subscript really is a number that we use. And so here it's saying, you know what? You're trying to refer to a particular workbook here, and it's not there. It's really the same thing. If I try to give it a number that's outside of its range, there's just not one to refer to. So it's the same error. You refer to an object in the set, but it's not there. And so it can't do what you're trying to do. Questions? No?
I have a question.
Yes?
When do you use this? Because it seems like you can just use it right click in X, right? So when would this be applicable?
Why would you ever do this?
Yeah, why would you?
That's a good question. Here's a reason why you might do this. I'll tell you the story later in the semester, but I was looking for some good data to use in class. Not a bunch of blank workbooks. What if we had some really juicy data, like data about the number of arsons that have been committed on college campuses across the nation? That would be great data to work with. And I was looking for this. I didn't set out looking for that, but I stumbled across that data at the FBI's website. Here's this data. And at the time, you can download this data directly from their site, but at the time, you couldn't download it. And so I thought, I want this data. I said, you want this data? Give us a call. Send us an email. Send us a message. I want this data. Teach me class. And they're great. We'll send you the data on CD. And I'm thinking, there'll be some charge for this. No charge. Let's send you the CD and send federal dollars at work. They're sending these CDs at no charge. So I got the CD and I look, it's got this great data. It's got campus by campus by campus. We want to compare University of Utah, how many violent assaults are there on the University of Utah's campus compared to BYU's campus. There's way more, by the way. Auto theft is off the chart up there. Very few autos are stolen on BYU campus. So, I'm looking at this data. Anyway, I'm playing this data, having a great time going, this is going to be great for class. We'll use this data later in class. 2 weeks afterwards, I got a call. My phone. I got a phone on my desk. It's no ordinary phone. This phone tells who's calling. Phone rings, and it says on it, FBI. FBI is calling me. That's an uncomfortable moment. FBI calls. I said, hello, this is Dr. Allen. And they said, oh, Dr. Allen, did we send you a CD a few weeks ago with crime data? I said, yes. It's a very nice disc. Thank you very much. I said, well, we accidentally sent you our original. Could you send that back to us? You're kidding me. What? So yeah, no problem. If that's all it takes to get the FBI off my case, send them a CD, no problem. You're out of here. Give them the CD. Made a copy first. Send them back. Send me the original. It's like someone else wanted the data. 2 weeks later, someone wants the data. Where's it? I don't know. Some intern mailed it out to me. Where'd it go? You mean I was supposed to make a copy of it before I put it in the mail? Yeah. Oh, so
How does that apply?
how does that answer this question? So, in that case, the data actually comes, it's like the data for universities, by state. And so you got 50 Excel files, one for each state. And so you will actually do this later in class. You'll say, all right, we've got to go and read all the data off of these different workbooks. We've got to consolidate it into one workbook. And so you would say, all right, we're going to go look and see what all the names of the files are in this directory. And then one at a time, you're going to have code that does this automatically. It goes, open the first one, look at the data, get the data that I want, bring it into my master worksheet, and then close that worksheet. Open the next one, bring it open, do whatever I want, close that worksheet, open the next one, and do it. So Yeah, I guess the whole first part of that story I didn't need to tell you to answer the question. I thought about it. It's such a fun story. I couldn't resist it. So yeah, so when you've got a set of workbooks that you need to process a bunch of them, open one, do something with it, and close it. Okay. Where were we? So we've closed workbooks. We've identified them by their name. So the truth is, one of the really powerful things here is that if I'm identifying them by their number, watch this. Let's suppose that I wanted to have some code that would just close all of these. Well, workbooks.count.close. We've already done it, but I didn't kind of point this out. Is that if I had some code, and we've seen how to make a loop. I'm not going to actually do it in a loop today. But if I had a loop that just said, you know what, keep executing this as long as there's any workbooks open, then that's what it would do. I'd execute that one, it would close the workbook, the loop comes back at the top, closes that one, closes the next one, closes the next one, and if I put this in a loop, it'll just boom, 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 close them all. It's kind of nice too. So being able to refer this to by a number, saying, listen, I don't care what the name is, just close it based on this number, then I can write some pretty simple algorithms that do stuff to a bunch of workbooks regardless of their name. So that can be helpful as well. Glad I did not close that one because this is the one that has the code in it. That would have been tough if we had to start again. In fact, let's just kind of take a look and let's just say, you know what, I'd like to make sure I don't accidentally close the one my code is in. Let's do that right here. First of all, there's a couple of other shortcuts we can get to refer to particular workbooks. One of them is this. So I'm not going to close that for a minute, and I'm going to say active workbook. Dot name. We'll do a debug.name. Just like there's an active cell, there's an object called active cell. What cell is it? Who knows? It's whatever cell the user currently has the active cell indicator in. It just says, look at the Excel, figure out which cell is active, and that's a dynamic reference to that cell. The same thing with active workbook. Whichever workbook is active. I don't even know what that's going to print. Client schedule W17. If this one's active, book 1, and I run that line, it's book 1. So I can ask for the active workbook. There's another really important shortcut to a particular workbook. Let's take a look. Instead of the active workbook, I can say this workbook. That seems like a really weird thing to say. Here's the thing you have to realize, is that anytime a line of VBA code is executed, it's stored in some workbook. It's in a workbook. Which workbook? This workbook. This workbook refers to the workbook that holds the code that is currently executed. So active workbook depends on which one's active. You know, it could be client schedule W17 or it could be book 1. But this workbook is always client schedule W17 because that's the workbook that this code is stored in. And it does not matter which workbook is active, it's just the workbook that has the code. So that can be really helpful. Because you're saying, listen, I don't care which workbook the user has activated, but I know this line of code is referring to stuff that's happening in the very same workbook. And so I can just refer to this workbook, and I know it's the workbook I want. I don't care which one's active. I don't even have to know the name of this one. You can change the name, I wouldn't care. It's this workbook. This is one of the, this is probably the shortcut that I use most often, even more often than active cell or active sheet. Okay, now, given the fact that we know we can ask what the name of this workbook is, we can prevent ourselves from accidentally closing the workbook by number. Where are we closing the workbook by number? So here's the line that closes the workbook by its number. So now I'm going to say if this workbook's name is equal to the workbook that I'm, I want this to be workbook name.close, is equal to workbooks.count.name, then we want to close it. Okay, the if-then statement we haven't played with yet. We're going to talk about this in great detail later on in the semester. But right now, what this said, this allows us to execute a line conditionally. We're only going to execute this line here if this condition between the if and the then, if this evaluates to true. Whatever I put between the this and then has to equal either true or false. And this expression, this workbook.name equals the name of the most recently opened workbook will either be true or false. This is going to have some name. This will have some name. If they're the same, it's true. If they're different, it's false. Now, I only want to execute this when they're different. Wait a minute. This is going to be true when they're the same. So what I'm going to do is, by the way, what is true? True is true. That should be no surprise. What is not true? False is not true. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this whole expression here, and I want this to execute when these are not equal to each other, so I'm just going to say, in the very front of this, not. This is a little bit weird. This part right here is either going to be true or false. And so at this point, I think it's going to be false, because I think I've got one other workbook open. And so right now, when I run this, this will evaluate to false. In fact, let me go ahead and just take that up here and see what it evaluates as. Yeah, that's false. But I want this to execute when it's true, or when it's false. And so I've got to flip that false to true by putting not in front of it. And so when this is false, put the not in front, this whole thing will equal true. So now it will execute only when these two are not equal to each other. So if I run this one time, we'll go ahead and step through this. I'll use F8 to execute through this. Okay, so right now it comes in here. It is going to close that. It closes book number 1. I'll execute with F8 again. Now, when I hit F8, if this whole condition is true, it should drop in and do this. But now, because this workbook is equal to workbooks.count.name, they're the same, that part will be true, the whole thing will be false, we should skip. And so we skip over that. So that's going to guarantee that I don't accidentally close the workbook that's got this code in it. Especially since I'm closing it, if I'm closing it with a false on save changes. Because it would dump off my changes without even prompting me. I've done that before, believe me. Questions on this here? So we're using these built-in collections. The truth is, folks, we're not going to work with the workbooks collection very much in this class. We'll work with it on that database or that crime data assignment. But other than that, I don't think we have any assignments that deal with it. But it's kind of a common thing when you get out. Questions? I had a guy come to my office today who took my class 6 years ago. 2010, he took my class. Works for some company that does training for auto dealerships. They train people at dealerships all across the nation. And apparently the guy just has made his career with VBA. Does crazy things with VBA and makes their lives better. Sends all kinds of email messages, beautifully formatted, does it all with VBA. Kind of. Why did I tell you that? I don't remember. Oh, because he does a lot of things with multiple workbooks. He's manipulating multiple workbooks all the time. Okay. Next, then, let's move on and look at multiple worksheets. Stop this. I'm going to go ahead and create another sub-procedure, sub-worksheet step. All right, so right now I've only got one workbook open. I've only got one sheet open. That's fine. But the first thing to realize, let me open up another workbook. Let's do it in the interface. Okay, so I've got 2 workbooks open. So first thing to realize is that the worksheets collection is always a part of a workbook. So it's a collection, so I can ask for how many elements are in the collection. I'm just going to print the worksheets count. Only one worksheet. How many worksheets do I have open right now? How many worksheets? Can you even tell from there? How many worksheets in this workbook? 1. How many worksheets in this workbook? 1. 1 plus 1 is? 2. So why is, when I say worksheets.count, we have a call from the, no idea who this is. Should we answer it?
Yeah.
Hello, caller.
Hi, Joe.
This is.
Hi, Ford Provo. How are you?
Oh, the Ford dealership. We're just talking about a dealership.
Sure.
Yeah, you're talking about my 1996 Ford Ranger.
Yes, sir, we are.
Go ahead, get to it.
So, we did verify that the 4-wheel drive is not working, and that's due to your 4-wheel drive shift motor inside your transfer case.
That sounds expensive.
What's that?
That sounds expensive.
It could be worse.
In case you're wondering, I'm teaching a class at BYU right now, and I usually don't bring my phone to class, but it rang, and so you're on speakerphone in front of the class, so be careful what you say.
Awesome.
He's not kidding either.
Well, I can't get it for you tomorrow. The parts and labor total would be $440.39 plus tax.
I'm going to have to do some soul searching. When are you going to order those parts? Do you have to order them today, like by 5?
I could have, if they're available locally, I put out a time to do it today, so.
Okay, so I can.
6, you can let me know until 6.
Oh, that's perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Enjoy your class over there at BYU.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Talk to you later. Bye.
Let's put that on mute. This is the truck that we actually bought with our RV. We bought a used RV. It came with the truck. We threw the truck in, It's a nice little truck. It's a little bit old, but it's really well maintained. My daughter, she's 17-year-old, my daughter drives. And 4-wheel drive doesn't work. It's snowing, and my wife thought, we should get 4-wheel drive fixed. I thought that's probably a good idea. I can hear the discussion now. Honey, it's going to cost $500 to fix the 4-wheel drive. Well, how much is your daughter's life worth? That's the next thing. The truck is probably worth not more than $1,200. And as a 2-wheel drive truck, it's probably worth about $1,000. Yeah. Anyway, we'll decide with that. Let's vote. How many think I should fix the old truck? How many to let it go and buy a new one? Yeah. Where was it? Debug.print worksheets.count. Okay, so here's the point. The worksheets collection always refers to one workbook. So it's always the worksheets inside a single book. There is no way. That's not true. There is no easy way to make a collection of all the worksheets in all the workbooks. We're talking about all the work. This collection of worksheets is going to be limited to a single workbook. Okay, so which workbook is it using? The active. I don't tell you which one. It means the active workbook. Oh, I recorded that whole thing. That whole discussion is going to be on the video. Whoops. Immortalized. Okay, so of course, if I want to make sure it's in book 9 here, regardless of which one's active, how would I do it? Workbooks. And then, whichever book I'm talking about, book9.worksheets.com.
You're just selecting the book.
Okay, so the question is, so you're just selecting the book? The answer is no. This does not select the workbook. Selecting the workbook is going to make it active. What I'm saying here is, I don't care which workbook's active. I don't want to change which workbook's active. I just want to refer to the collection of worksheets that's in book number 9. Don't make it active. If it is active, that's okay. If it's not active, don't change it. I'm just referring to that set, that collection.
So what's the difference between that and making it active?
So what's the difference between this? I'll run this. Let me go ahead and put, in workbook number 9, I'm going to add a new sheet. I've got 2 worksheets now in book number 9. I'll run this. It should tell me I got 2. There it is. That's great. So what's the difference between this and workbooks.9.select and then just worksheets.count? First of all, this is going to print the same thing. This will print too. See? Objects support this property or method. Workbooks, book 9. Do I have that spelled wrong? Workbooks, book 9, not active. Here we go. I really couldn't select it. Did I have select spelled wrong? Oh, you can activate or select worksheets, but workbooks you have to activate. That's interesting.
Learn something new.
Yeah. So for worksheets, you can either activate them or select them, but workbooks, you've got to activate. Okay, so we're going to activate the workbook, and then we're going to print the number of worksheets in the active workbook. We're inferring that it's the active workbook. So what's the difference between this line and these two lines? The answer is this one activates the workbook. The other one doesn't. I might have some other workbook there that I don't even really want to activate. Users working on this workbook in front. I don't want to pop a new one in front just so I can refer to it, leave it back in the background, or just do something with the sheets. Maybe I want to add a new sheet to it. I can do that, actually. Instead of printing which one is counted, I'm going to reverse the commenting on this. Debug.print. Instead of printing it, what I want to do is I want to add a new worksheet. Worksheets.add. And so now if I run that should give me a new worksheet in. We've got 3 now. I add it again, it'll give me the 4th one. I've got 4 worksheets here now. And so that will do that without ever activating the worksheet. Question?
Does it have the ability to name it as a same line of code?
Does it have the ability to name it in this same line of code? Oh, woe is me. Why did you ask that question? The answer is yes, but it's painful. The code is simple, but it will melt your brain. Who wants a little brain melting today? Who says, let's move on? What time is this class in? 15 minutes? Okay, let's melt your brain. This is actually kind of an important thing to grasp. If you can get this, it'll be like, oh. So, if you're checking your text messages or your email or whatever, finish off that little message that you're doing, and then focus on here. What we're about to do is something you cannot just glance at and understand. Okay? It turns out that some methods, when you execute them, they send something back. It seems weird. And when you select a cell, it doesn't send anything back. It just makes that cell the active cell. But when you add a worksheet, it says, oh, we just added a worksheet, and by the way, this whole expression now will evaluate to the worksheet that it just added. That seems so strange to say. Watch this. Type, T-Y-P-E, name, type name. This is a function built into the language, VBA, and I'm just going to put a string there, hi. That will tell me what type this expression is. So this is what is this? It's a string. We haven't talked about data types so much, but if you're from another language, you know this is a string. And it tells you, yeah, that's a string. What if I put in here, some number? 0. That's an integer. Hey, that's great. What if I put in something like a reference to a sheet? Active sheet. That's a worksheet. It tells us what this is. Now, I'm going to take this whole expression here, and I'm going to put it inside of, I'm going to do a debug.print. Oh, by the way, up here in the immediate window, the shortcut for print is a question mark. That just kind of flowed off my fingers. I didn't mean to introduce that to you yet, but that means print. It doesn't work down here, just in the immediate window. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to print the type name of this expression. Here's the part that seems really weird. Why does this even have a type? It's an activity. It goes and adds something. Why does it have a type? It has a type because it sends a reference back to the sheet that it created right to this very location. And so when I execute this, first of all, it's going to do it. See how that does that? I can do a debug.print. Oh, never put it in place. Or did I type over? There we go. So this tells me that this whole expression evaluates to a worksheet. Which worksheet is it talking about? The worksheet that it just added. So, I can say dot name equals my new sheet. This is a collection. Inside the parentheses, I now identify an element of the collection, and so this part evaluates to a particular workbook. From there, I refer to another sheet, another collection. This is the collection of all the sheets inside that workbook. From there, I say add, and this now adds a sheet and then evaluates to the sheet that it added. And so because of that, I can say .name and modify the name property of the sheet that got added by the add method of this worksheet of this one. Execute that. There's no error. I come to the code. It has added a sheet and changed the name of the sheet it added to my new sheet. So this is the first time we've seen this, where we execute a method. It does something, but then, like a property, it hands me back a reference to a particular object. Exactly the same thing we do when we say something like this. Active cell dot font dot name equals Arial. When I get to this property right here, I'm saying talk to this object, refer to this property, and that property actually is a reference to another object. This part hands me back an object. It's an object that already exists. This part hands me back an object. It's an object that it just barely made. So the answer to your question is yes, it's pretty easy. You just say add, and you put .name, and you say equals something else. We'll do some more sophisticated things. Instead of just changing the name here, we will capture a reference to this object and then use that to change the name and do various other things. But that's beyond what we're ready to hear about today. How many of you are looking at this and saying to yourself, why did I wait to drop this class? Is it too late? Yeah, this is, whoa! You can skip this for now. You can pretend you never saw this. And you'd be okay. All right. So we can add a worksheet. I probably should do this one just here as an add a worksheet. Or we can add a worksheet and then modify one property of it right here. What else do we have to do with worksheets? Worksheets. Okay, here's a common thing that we want to do with worksheets. Is we'll want to delete a worksheet. So I'm going to delete in the active workbook. Actually, we'll do it in workbooks number 9 to be sure I'm getting the right one. Okay, then worksheets.count .delete. What does this do? It's actually very subtle. I've got kind of a strange thing I've done here. So first of all, this says we're talking about a particular workbook and the worksheets collection in that. Then we're going to give it some number to tell which one we want. Now, which number are we talking about here? What is this going to return? Okay, so let's look at this sheet right here. It has how many sheets they have? I don't even know. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let's see. Okay, so if I was just to execute that, what would it print? Why does it print 1? Which worksheet am I talking about? The active worksheet. Which is the active worksheet? This one is the active worksheet. So here I've told it this gets me down to not the active workbook, but I meant to say which workbook am I talking about the worksheets collection of? The active workbook. It's the worksheets collection in the active workbook. Here, this is the worksheets collection in workbook number 9. But what's this the worksheets collection of? This workbooks.worksheets applies only to this collection, not to this one. So what I'm saying is I want to delete a particular worksheet in the worksheet collection of workbook number 9.
So why the extra stuff?
What's that?
So why
what?
Why the extra worksheets?
Well, here I'm trying to delete the most recently added one. So this worksheets.count. I'm sorry, not the most recently added one. This one will actually return it in the order that they appear here in the worksheet. So this will be the last worksheet over here is the one I'm trying to do. The problem I'm trying to point out here is that just because I identified the workbook for this worksheets collection doesn't mean that I've identified the workbook for this one. And so to make sure I'm talking about workbook number 9, I've got to prefix both of those worksheets collection with workbook number 9. It's a really long, ugly line. Look at the workbooks, at workbook number 9, look at the worksheets collection, count all that there are in that one, and then that'll give me a number. This will delete the last one. So now when I execute that, it should delete sheet number 2. The workbooks collection has them in order that they were opened. The worksheets collection has them in the order in which they appear on the tabs down. Doesn't care what order they were created in, how they're currently displayed. So if I execute this now, regardless of which workbook is active, I'm going to delete that. Yes. That should delete that sheet 2. It's now gone. I do it again, it's going to delete sheet 3. And we'll keep deleting them until there's only one left. If I try to delete the last one, it'll say, error, you've got to have at least one worksheet in the workbook. So let me delete the last one. Now, how many of you find it annoying that when I execute this, it prompts me, are you sure you want to delete this? Yeah, that's terrible. Of course I'm sure. I wrote a whole line of code to delete it. You think I was just playing around? And so, it seems like weird. We can tell it. We can tell it to suppress that message. Here's how we do it. Think about the hierarchy. We've got a collection of cells that exists in a sheet. That's in a collection of sheets that exists in a workbook. That's in a collection of workbooks that exist in the in the eternities. In the application. The application is Excel. But this language works in Excel, Word, PowerPoint, Access, others. And so instead of saying Excel, the collection that holds all the workbooks is called the application. And so I'm actually going to make a setting of the application, the topmost container of stuff. Here's how I do it. Application dot display alerts equals false. And I like to turn it back on right when I'm done with whatever I want to suppress the alert on. So now when I execute this, I've said, hey, when I do something, I mean it. Don't be putting no alert up there, just do it. And so that should delete that without any message. Do it again, we'll delete number 7. 7's now gone. My new sheet is gone. If I try to delete sheet 1, it's going to say, sorry, workbook's got to contain at least one visible worksheet. So, that's how you can suppress the alerts. Yes?
So you put inside the worksheets, you put like workbooks, book 9. Is that really necessary? Because we already called workbook 9. No, further.
This one?
Yeah, this one. Is that necessary?
This is totally necessary. Because if I was to get rid of this, it would say, okay, we've identified which worksheets collection you're talking about right here. You're talking about the one in book 9. But here, I didn't tell it which one. And so I could really mean workbook 7 for this. And so just because I identified it for this one doesn't mean it follows through for this one. I've got to redefine it on that one as well. This does not apply to this whole line. This applies only to this collection.
So will it give you an error with that, or will it just do something really screwy? As in reference another work.
Yeah, this is not going to be an error. Let's go ahead and execute it. You'll see what it does. Let me make this my active workbook. This one's my active workbook. How many sheets are here? Just one. How many sheets are on this one, the one I'm deleting out of? Look again. There's like 4. What I'm trying to do is delete this one, this number 11 here. But when that's the active sheet, the way this will execute, it'll say, okay, I'm going to delete a worksheet out of this collection in book 9. It's going to count the worksheets in the active workbook, which is going to give me what? 1. It's going to delete worksheet 1 out of book 9. It was called sheet 1. It's gone. Sheet 1 no longer exists. So it looked at this one and said, hey, I'm going to worksheets that are in the active workbook, only 1. Use that 1 to delete that worksheet number 1 out of this particular book. So yeah, we really do want that to say workbook 9 right here. Okay, yeah, question?
So is it the order that they were added in, or is it the order that they appear
Yeah,
on.
it's not the order that they were added. For workbooks, their order in the collection is when they were opened. For worksheets, their order in the collection is left to right as they appear down here in the tab rack.
So sheet 10 is number 1.
Yeah, right now worksheet 10 is sheet 1.
The first line.
The first one in the collection. Oh, we didn't get to shapes yet, and we don't have time to do shapes. Pity. We're going to cover shapes when we get to charts. You'll be okay. But I do want to show you one more thing, and that is worksheets can exist in one of 3 states of visibility. Here they are. So here's this workbook right here. I'm going to come to workbook. Here's book 9. Here's these sheets. Here's sheet number 10. I'm now looking at the properties for sheet number 10 here. It's probably kind of hard to see. Let me zoom in. Windows plus. Okay, so here we are. This is sheet number 10. Sheet 10, that's the name. Its visible property, it can be one of 2 things. It can be visible, it can be hidden, or it can be very hidden. So if we make this hidden, by the way, we can come over here. And now, where'd sheet 10 go? Well, it's hidden. Right click, unhide. Here it is, unhide it. Let's make it very hidden. I'm lost, how do I get that period there? So now, let's make it very hidden. Unable to set the visible property of the worksheet class. Well, that's probably because it was active. Let me make it so it's not active. So here's, make sheet 9 active. Sheet 10, very hidden. Let's go back to the workbook. Here it is. It's not visible. Right click. There's nothing to unhide. It's very hidden. There's no way to unhide that through the Excel interface. There's nothing you could do just with Excel. You've got to do that in VBA. And you could do it, by the way, right here on the drop-down list, or you could do it through code.
You can still reference that.
You can still reference it. You could still add sheets to it. You could, refer to the cells. You could build a chart on that workbook. Because you know how to refer to a particular worksheet. You can just say, oh yeah, that sheet number 10, in parentheses, sheet 10, or it's the very first one. You can just say sheet 1, right, with the number 1 because it's the very first one all the way to the left. But I could change it here by just saying sheets, worksheets, number 1, dot visible equals 1. It's 0, 1, or 2 to set those 3 values. And if I execute that, that should pop it to be visible again. And there it is, now visible. So you can control that through code. You could have a worksheet that your user never even knows exists. You can put settings on. You could put some kind of really complex model on there, and then you could have some macro that puts a value in there, does the calculations. You pull the result out, put it into a worksheet, and the user has no idea that it's there, no way to find out. Couldn't accidentally stumble across it. It's very hidden. Last thing that I want to cover, and that is, quickly here, is that so far we've talked about the sheets collection, the worksheets collection. But there's another collection just called sheets. I'm going to make a chart right here. You don't have time to do this along with me, so just watch. I'm going to put a chart in here, and then I'm going to move this chart to be a chart sheet. I should say move chart. There's move chart. I'm going to put this onto its own sheet. Okay, so now I've got a worksheet and a chart sheet. So if we look really quickly here, if I say debug.print worksheets.count, it tells me there's 1. If I say charts.count, it tells me there's 1. There's 1 worksheet and there's 1 chart sheet. If I say I don't care what kind of sheet it is, chart sheet or worksheet, just say sheets.count, it'll tell me there's 2. So I've got a sheets collection, I've got a charts collection, and I've got a worksheets collection. Sheets is all the sheets, chart sheets or worksheets. Charts is all the charts. Worksheets is all the worksheets. If I say sheets.add, it's got to pick one. either make a chart or a worksheet, and we'll pick a worksheet. If you just say sheets.add, it'll think you must be in a worksheet rather than a chart. All right, anything else? Thanks for coming, folks. Class dismissed. Thank you. Thank you. You're too kind.